Welcome to the Beau Show, the home of faith, family, and freedom. Scientific freedom and freedom of inquiry. That is the theme of today's Earth Day episode. Today is indeed Earth Day, and while the climate alarmists will be getting a lot of coverage, I wanted to speak to an actual scientist who studies the Earth. So I found Gregory Wrightstone, a geologist who has written immensely on the topic of climate change, and specifically how the education system and even science itself has become, well, unscientific. I think you'll find this quite interesting. Here's my chat with Gregory Wrightstone. Gregory Wrightstone, thank you so much for joining me today. It is Earth Day, so I felt today was an appropriate time to talk to you. You're a geologist, an author, and the executive director of the CO2 Coalition. So tell me about your work at the CO2 Coalition and what it aims to do.
We promote the many benefits of the combination of modest warming that we've seen. Just for example, it's the Earth's atmosphere has warmed about 0.8 of a degree since 1900. So we call that modest warming. The modest warming combined with increasing CO2 is leading to Earth's ecosystems that are thriving and prospering, completely contrary to what we're being told in the media. By almost every metric we look at, humanity's benefiting, and the Earth's ecosystems from the near polar regions to the equator are all what's called greening. The vegetation's exploding. We hear a lot about deforestation. The fact of the matter is we're actually experiencing over the last 50 or 80 years reforestation, a huge increase in expansion of forests. Yes, we can talk more about some of the areas that are being cut down, but it's not due to climate change. And so we've got a lot going on at the CO2 Coalition. We stay out of politics per se and stick to the scientists. We have some 125 of the top scientists and experts, including engineers and economists in the world. These are top-rate physicists. I'm a geologist, chemist. There are many aspects of climate change, and we cover them all. So we got into, for example, just on Monday of this previous week, we filed a comment to the Department of Energy in opposition to their proposed regulations on gas stoves. They're basically going to ban gas stoves through excessive regulation, which is, and what they're doing, it's a death by 1,000 cuts for your listeners. They're systematically removing their freedoms and their liberties to choose what stove to buy, what car to drive, what shower head to buy, just a washing machine. They're trying to regulate washing machines. They want everything to be electrified. So we're pushing back against that. We filed 2 amicus briefs last year, one against the EPA. One was in Louisiana versus Biden in the Fifth Circuit. In fact, the oral arguments for the EPA were just heard in the DC Circuit Court a week ago. So we're doing that, trying to protect Americans' rights to choose and freedom to choose.
From a scientific level. Well, I know recently your CO2 Coalition bought a booth at the National Science Teaching Association, whom you'd criticized, and you got booted from the conference. So tell me that story.
Let's just step back a moment. About a year and a half ago, a lot of our members, were deeply concerned about the state of science education in America and also Canada and other around the world. Really, it's about the same. They saw that students were instead of being taught the scientific process and critical thinking skills, they were being indoctrinated into this climate alarmist philosophy. They were taught the consensus that the Earth is spiraling into one cataclysmic event after another because of our excesses. And so we wanted to do something. They formed an education committee. We're ready to roll out probably next week our CO2 Learning Center website. We've produced a series of comic books that are done manga style, which is really cool. The kids love them. We've got a talented Brazilian artist to do the comic books. We've done a series of videos. CO2 Learning Center is our YouTube, CO2 Learning Center. The videos are great. They're done anime style. Again, the kids love them. So we're presenting science about photosynthesis, about gases in the air, about carbon dioxide and its benefits. We're teaching them science without climate alarmism. And the best part of this, Beau, is that we've actually got lesson plans that go along with each one of the videos and each one of the books. So homeschool parents, charter schools, it's going to be huge for the homeschool movement. We're going to roll this hopefully all in the next, I keep saying next week, but I think it will be next week. And so we've had a huge outpouring. So we took this to the National Science Teaching Association's annual convention in Atlanta 2 weeks ago. Leading up to it, we looked at the NSTA's policy on climate change, and it was horrific. They promote a scientific, they're saying it's a consensus. The science is settled. There's no argument. And they were flat out promoting censorship of any facts or science that disputed the notion of man-made catastrophic warming. They called it misinformation, disinformation, political propaganda. Well, there's a lot of science, there's a lot of facts that call into question whether man's increases of CO2 are leading to catastrophic consequences. We say no, and we have the science and the facts to dispute that. So we published a publication challenging their climate change, and we published it the first day of the convention. The publication date, we had them all printed there. What was amazing, Beau, we got to the convention, 14,000 teachers. We were overwhelmed by teachers wanting our materials. We gave away all of our lesson plans in the first 2 hours. On the second day, the second morning, we distributed all of our comic books and educational materials. And then we got visited by the NSTA high muckety mucks that came to the booth and said, you have to remove all your materials. You can't come to our convention and criticize us. And I said, I told them to go pound salt. I said, heck no, we're not. We're here to promote critical thinking skills and scientific method, and we're gonna continue doing that. And they said, well, then you're gonna have to leave. I said, okay, we'll pack up and get out. So we said the NSTA is censoring science, and they proved it by censoring science.
That's amazing. You know, the whole point of what scientists do, like yourself, and what I suppose the education system is supposed to do, is to, like you said, introduce critical thinking skills of the scientific method that we always constantly have to be questioning. I want to go back. You mentioned when you started noticing some of this. When did you first notice that there was an indoctrination going on within the education system and the scientific community? When did you first see that?
Well, this started many years ago. It's hard to really put a date to it, but it's getting worse and worse and worse. I was the founder of Pennsylvanians Against Common Core. I learned about Common Core when it first came out. I said, I'm not going to get involved. And when I learned about it, I had to fight it. And then I've turned it over. There's a bunch of mama bears running it now. And they're fiercely protective of their children and their education. All of my grandchildren are homeschooled. And so I'm strongly empowered to provide those people, like my daughter that's homeschooling my grandchildren. She loves what we're doing. And I think this thing is just what we're doing is going to blow up, because we've got scientists. These are PhD scientists. Bear in mind, Dr. Sharon Camp has a PhD in analytic chemistry. She does our lesson plans. Former AP science teacher. She was at the convention with me. It was me and 3 women, all young scientists. Sharon Camp, PhD chemistry. Rafaela Nascimento from Brazil, PhD chemistry, one of the top nanotechnology experts. These are no lightweights intellectually. These are brilliant women, and they brought the NSTA guys come down. They kicked the 3 women out, and with security, brought 3 security officers to escort us out of the building. It was surreal. It was surreal, and it just serve to exemplify that they need to silence people like us, people that are actually providing good science, good data. And again, it's hard to stay out of the politics in this subject. We're trying to navigate that by just providing interesting scientific data. And it's been a fun process, and it was empowering, actually. But with the big takeaway, Beau, that we got, the teachers themselves were thirsty for the information we were providing. It was those in charge that felt threatened.
You mentioned you try to stay out of the politics of it, but one group that has not tried to stay out of the politics of it is the left. And so we hear words like carbon credit, carbon offset, carbon neutral. I mean, what is it about carbon dioxide that has made it the pariah for the left scientific theory?
They're alleging that increases in carbon dioxide are driving dangerous levels of warming. We see, though, what they're using are failed climate models. They use these models to predict future warming. We know pretty accurately what the temperature has been. We've got thermometer records, and the satellite records go back to 1979. Satellites are the best way to measure, but again, we've only got about 45 years of data for that satellite record. So they're saying, well, more CO2 is going to lead to tipping points, and it'll be skyrocketing temperatures, and it'll lead to drought, famine, and death. They're greatly overestimating the warming effect of carbon dioxide. Our scientists here have done a lot of scientific work. Dr. Richard Lindzen, Dr. William Happer, Wingard have published over the last year and a half some really detailed science that I don't frankly understand. It's physics. But they think that a doubling of CO2 will lead to about a half a degree of warming, whereas the other side thinks it'll be 5 to 8 degrees of warming. And the science doesn't support that. And the other thing, Beau, that one of my favorite subjects is the relationship, and it's a strong relationship between human history and climate history. And if we go back to the first great civilizations of the Assyrians, the Hittites, the Babylonians, the Harappan civilization, which you may not ever have heard of, but in India, huge civilization empire. These all grew up during what was called the Minoan warm period. It was much, much warmer than today. Life was good. Food was bountiful. These great empires arose. And then it started getting cold, led into the Greek Dark Ages. And what we see repeated time and time again, these great warming periods, the Minoan, the Roman, the medieval, were correlated closely with huge benefits to humanity. And in the cold periods led, in each case, when it started getting cold, it led to crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. It was not good when it got cold. And think about it, isn't that just opposite of what we're being told? We're being told, oh, we can't let it get 1.5 degrees warmer. That's not what history tells us. History tells us we should welcome the warmth and fear the cold. And nobody's planning for what's going to happen when it gets cold again, and it will. It probably won't be as bad as the previous cold periods, because we're not moving food around by ox cart. We have refrigeration. But you're not going to stop what we saw again, crop failure will occur again, just like it did in each previous one.
Keep watching at epochtv.com/The Beau Show.